is subversive precisely because it dares to admit that all is not as it should be. And so we are holding out for, working for, creating, prophesying, and living into something better, for the oaks of righteousness to tower, for leaves to blossom, for the healing of the nations, for swords to be beaten into plowshares, for joy to come in the morning, and for redemption and justice. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Carleton. This opening convocation marks the beginning of a new academic year, and it particularly marks the beginning of the college experience of the great class of 2024. We may be assembling virtually today, but we are still coming together as we launch a year that will surely bring much learning and growth for us all. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of the land on which Carleton stands. Over the course of the past year and a half, a task force in Northfield, led by the city's Human Rights Commission and with active participation from both Carleton and St. Olaf, has been working to create a land acknowledgement statement for the city and its major institutions and community groups. Carleton endorses this effort, as well as the proposed statement that we now intend to use on public occasions such as this, which reads as follows. We stand on the homelands of the Wapakut Band of the Dakota Nation. We honor with gratitude the people who've stewarded the land through the generations and their ongoing contributions to this region. We acknowledge the ongoing injustices that we have committed against the Dakota Nation, and we wish to interrupt this legacy, beginning with acts of healing and honest storytelling about this place. Land acknowledgement statements should tell an honest story about the oppression of Indigenous peoples and should prompt further candid, unflinching accounts of the experiences of these peoples. Such statements should include both the past and the present and emerge from meaningful bonds with Indigenous peoples. We hope that this statement begins to accomplish some of this, but a statement is just a starting point to the important ongoing work of building essential relationships with our closest Indigenous neighbors, the Mdewakanton Dakota of Shakopee and of the Prairie Island Indian community. This relationship building and the resultant learning in which our community is engaged must involve active listening and bearing witness, and must also include action, both immediate short-term change and continuous long-term change. One preliminary step that we hope will be instructive and inspiring for everyone, including our Indigenous neighbors, involves student and faculty plans to bring the Why Treaties Matter exhibit on the 1851 Dakota Land Cession Treaties to the Perlman Teaching Museum next fall, building events around the exhibit in collaboration with neighboring Dakota nations. We look forward to this exhibit and to fostering greater understanding of and stronger ties with the Dakota people on the land we currently call Northfield. As the Land Acknowledgement Statement decrees, it is both necessary and right to recognize and attempt to rectify legacies of ongoing injustice. And at this moment, we are all called upon to undertake necessary dialogue and action that can heal, rebuild, and re-envision many of the varied communities to which we belong, including our academic, living learning community here at Carleton. We're here together at Carleton to engage boldly in the noble and never-ending tasks of learning, growing, pushing back the boundaries of knowledge and understanding, sharing what we know through teaching and mentorship, investigating our responsibilities and duties to one another, and seeking to adhere to these responsibilities and duties as our students graduate and embark on meaningful careers and lives that we hope will improve the world. We are committed at this college to hard work and to cultivating resilience in ourselves, each other, and our community. Carleton faculty and students eagerly seek out the thorniest and the most intriguing questions. We are convinced that grappling with the big ideas and giving free rein to our curiosity is well worth the more sustained and more intense effort, even if it inevitably leads to some missteps or false starts. When we fail, as we all do, we start over. When we stumble, as we all do, we lift ourselves up or turn to a nearby friend or guide to help us back to our feet. Like our hunger for intellectual challenge, our perseverance is a strength. As exemplified by the fact that this is a virtual and remote opening convocation, it's abundantly clear that this is going to be an unprecedented, sometimes disorienting, and remarkably memorable year at Carleton. It can and should be a remarkably important and successful year here too. My confidence that we will achieve such lasting positive outcomes stems in no small part from the community's inclination and capacity to engage in hard work and the resilience that I've just spoken of. However, this year all of us, and our students in particular, will also be called upon to exhibit a third element of character, a level of maturity and mutual respect that we may not have expected on college campuses or among young adults in less troubled times. I think of such maturity as the ability and willingness to respond to one's environment with subtle awareness of the appropriate time, place, and manner for taking a given action, always in light of the prevailing circumstances. In great part here, I'm referring to each of us on campus honoring Carleton's community covenant. Hard work, resilience, maturity, and mutual respect, then. We must hold ourselves and each other to these touchstones, both in and out of the classroom this year. We need to draw upon these qualities now as both our college and the United States confront two interrelated crises: a reckoning with this nation's long-standing failure to achieve racial equity, and the ravages of a pandemic. My brief observations today can merely scratch the surface of issues that demand everyone's sustained attention and that I especially hope will be integral to students' learning at Carleton. Yet there are several points I need to make as the new academic year begins. This is a time when, at an individual level, each of us must consider how racism and other forms of hatred and ignorance affect our lives and our circumstances. We must seek out our blind spots and prejudices that we carry and examine the unearned privileges from which many of us benefit. But as we do this, we must not mistake racism as just a personal failing. It is also systemic, and this compels us at an institutional level to understand why, to acknowledge, and to correct for the fact that Carleton, like all institutions and like society as a whole, is also infected by racism. In taking up the urgent work to dismantle systemic racism and confronting this challenge amidst a pandemic that disproportionately harms the poor and those who are Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. In doing this work, many of us may come to the edges of our current understanding. But as I just articulated, I think and hope that this liminal space can be a welcome place to be. Carleton is comprised of intelligent, dynamic, compassionate people whose work begins at these borders. We are drawn to what we do not yet know with curiosity, wonder, and great attention. We should neither minimize nor romanticize the unknowns that bedevil many of us right now, and which are arising in distinct ways. First, there's a not knowing that is generally pragmatic, and which is exemplified by the pandemic. How do we keep each other healthy and safe when the coronavirus continues to rage? How do we proceed with learning and research under these disruptive circumstances? How do we configure living and dining and social arrangements and devise testing and tracking regimes that minimize the spread of this disease? Second, there is a not knowing that is even more profound and wrenching, and which is exemplified by issues of racial justice. How should Carleton face up to and then overhaul features of our college that are fundamentally disempowering, such as racism or sexism? Many members of this community have had to endure the pain, despair, and anger of being marginalized or held back in various ways their entire lives. These individuals already know all too well the scourge of inequity. Yet too many others at Carleton have blithely viewed their lives and their world through innately racist lenses, defining themselves and others by the terrible lie that some individuals are of inherently greater worth or value than others. Both such institutional and individual not knowing or refusal to know demand pressing attention and corrective action. As we've all experienced in the classroom, honestly saying, "I don't know," as I mean it here, is not a pretense for avoiding hard work. It takes real courage to admit this and nevertheless to engage, especially in the presence of a highly respected professor and intelligent peers. Yet we must all be brave enough to enter into discussion about intractable issues, even when we don't know how we're going to navigate the flow of the discussion or how to answer the pointed rejoinder. We must be willing to engage, even if that means discovering that our ideas may be unfounded or even harmful. Indeed, acknowledging that we can't see or haven't seen everything, that our perspectives and our experiences have been limited, may be a precondition for true learning. Says James Baldwin, "Nothing can be changed until it is faced." Truly facing something as a student, a brilliant work of modern art, seemingly impenetrable poetry, unexpected data or lab results, almost always involves owning our uncertainty and error not just once, but repeatedly. What am I looking at here? What is this? How are my own expectations or paradigms keeping me from really seeing what's in front of me? A genuine scholar, and I would assert, a reasonable and a thoughtful human being, takes some time before answering or even trying to answer. A good thinker is willing and eager to investigate those aspects of themselves or the world that they do not understand. We must be equally intrepid when seeking out the prejudice each of us may be harboring, and which shapes our lives, our college, and our communities. Especially for students and scholars who are accustomed to praise for their intelligence and rewards for their right answers, admitting your ignorance and opening up to criticism your innermost thoughts and what can feel like your very personhood is not just embarrassing, but downright painful. Sometimes the unfamiliar, disorienting, and uncomfortable lessons we learn at Carleton are abstract and theoretical, and appropriately so. Physics with implications that challenge our fundamental beliefs about so-called reality. A novel that unexpectedly aligns our sympathies with a perceived enemy. But in the coming year, some of the lessons ahead will inevitably be direct and personal, and we can expect genuine discomfort as we confront issues of racism and privilege. If and as this feels confusing, exhausting, and infuriating, if and as it finds many of us bewildered, indignant, ashamed, or angry. We can be sure right then that the opportunity for deep and lasting insight and truly positive change are at hand. We aspire to be a truly supportive learning and work environment for all students, faculty, and staff. But we fall unacceptably short when students are not able to realize their academic dreams, when community members feel marginalized, and where such troubling patterns persist across the years. In order to achieve our goals, we must promptly address underlying structures and assumptions that are inequitable and unjust. Because we need change now, we are already taking direct action on a variety of fronts, such as requiring anti-racism training for students, faculty, staff, and trustees starting this fall. But there is also inevitable tension between the desire for instantaneous reform and needing to engage in the deep reflection and purposeful planning required to truly dismantle racism. Without due care, quickly proffered solutions to grave injustices can result in inadequate compromise at best and performative lip service at worst. So we shall navigate this tension together, effecting immediate change where we can and should, while also identifying and implementing longer-term and sustainable change. To this last point, the Board of Trustees has endorsed the creation of a community plan for inclusion, diversity, and equity at Carleton, with a special focus on Black experiences. In the coming weeks, we'll focus on the best way to undertake such comprehensive planning. As with other planning efforts at Carleton, it will include processes to hear the views and voices of students, faculty, staff, alumni, parents, and friends across the college community, including those who've been angered by Carleton's past actions or inactions. This will be fulfilling and difficult work. I trust you welcome it and will join in the dialogue and change ahead. This year, as never before, our hard work, resilience, and mutual respect, magnified by kindness and caring, can enable Carleton to cohere and then rise to new and greater levels of community, of learning, and of academic distinction. Thank you. Each fall at Opening Convocation, we invite a speaker who will help us place our academic work and our college community in meaningful and timely perspective. Today, we have the opportunity to hear from one such luminary. Political leader, author, and entrepreneur Stacey Abrams made history and captured the nation's attention as the first Black woman to become the gubernatorial nominee for a major party in any state, going on to win more votes than any other Democrat in Georgia history. Ms. Abrams has a most distinguished academic background. She holds a BA in interdisciplinary studies, in political science, economics, and sociology from Spelman College, magna cum laude. As a Harry S. Truman Scholar, she earned a Master of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. And in 1999, she was awarded a JD from Yale Law School. After serving 11 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, 7 of them as minority leader, Ms. Abrams became the 2018 Democratic nominee for governor in one of the most watched and closest elections that year. In the aftermath of the electoral mismanagement and voter suppression experienced in that gubernatorial contest, Ms. Abrams launched the organization Fair Fight to ensure free and fair elections. She has also founded other organizations devoted to training and hiring young people of color and tackling social issues at both the state and national levels. A recipient of Harvard's Institute of Politics John F. Kennedy New Frontier Award, Ms. Abrams was named Public Official of the Year by Governing magazine. From launching a company to starting a daycare center for homeless teen moms to running successful political campaigns, Stacey Abrams is not only focused on issues worth fighting for, but also demonstrated how to turn good ideas into meaningful action. While Ms. Abrams is only here with us virtually today, we are grateful for her time and the opportunity to hear her remarks. I know I speak for all of Carleton in looking forward to the occasion when we can welcome her to campus in person. Stacey Abrams.
Thank you to President Poskanzer and the entire Carleton College family for the opportunity to participate in your convocation today. For over 150 years, this gathering has been a time for students, faculty, and staff to congregate and affirm continuity with the past while looking ahead to a more successful year. Nearly 30 years ago, I sat in a chapel at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, eager and excited and filled with trepidation. It too was the opening convocation for our freshman class, for returning students, faculty, and staff. The distance between me and my fellow students felt immeasurable, despite being crammed together on pews and linked by a common decision to join our college family. For each of you today, the distance is real, a physical barrier born of tragedy and caution, of miles. Thank you to President Poskanzer and the entire Carleton College family for the opportunity to participate in your convocation today. For over 150 years, this gathering has been a time for students, faculty, and staff to congregate and affirm continuity with the past while looking ahead to a more successful year. Nearly 30 years ago, I sat in a chapel at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, eager and excited and filled with trepidation. It too was the opening convocation for our freshman class, for returning students, faculty, and staff. The distance between me and my fellow students felt immeasurable, despite being crammed together on pews and linked by a common decision to join our college family. For each of you today, the distance is real, a physical barrier born of tragedy and caution, of miles and necessity. Yet you are linked by a storied history that began in 1866, in the wake of another moment of national crisis. And you are connected by a diversity of thought, of ambition, and of determination. Less than a year later, in 1992, I stood again in Sisters Chapel, this time offering an impassioned plea to my fellow students to join me in a march to City Hall in response to the Rodney King verdict on police brutality. And I set up a table on our college campus quad, exhorting people to register to vote and cast a ballot in the upcoming presidential election. Sound familiar? The writer of Ecclesiastes warns us that what has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. It's tempting to hear these words as ones of defeat. Why bother? But instead, I hear them as a call to action and as a challenge of the old answers, as a chance to do it better this time. You are, each of you, gathered in this collective identity that is Carleton College to defy the notion that nothing new can emerge from crisis. The extraordinary assemblage of intellect, service, and connection that led you to choose this place will be what builds the resilience of your student body. But you are also bound by a perseverance that will carry you across what may seem like insurmountable obstacles. Separated by a pandemic, you were brought together by a spirit of imagination that will see this world made better by your actions. But we cannot fix what we refuse to acknowledge. Our nation mourns the loss of nearly 200,000 Americans who have perished at the hands of the coronavirus. In your neighborhoods and across the nation, millions face eviction from their homes and others struggle to hold on to what little economic security they have. And in a time of racial reckoning that is upon us, a demand that we respect Black lives, that we count all Americans as whole and wholly deserving of their citizenship and humanity, this can seem like a terrible burden. Americans of all backgrounds and people around the world bear the scars of these crises, some terribly more than others. But each day we are tested as a society, and the urge to give in can be overwhelming. But today is an affirmation of the potential that gives me hope. The potential that is the resilience I know lies within you, the bright young minds of this present age. Faced with social distancing, you close the gap by pursuing your education virtually. Chastened by images of brutality, indifference, and demonization, you correct our course away from the disparities in education and healthcare, criminal justice, voting rights, and environmental inaction. Together, from your earliest moments, you've compelled a new language of inclusion, a new dimension of identity. And as you join your fellow Carleton Knights, you are the ones who will serve as a North Star for how we do it better this time. Perseverance is only one part of how we write a new story. Resilience is the other. 2 years ago, I waged a campaign to lead the state of Georgia, but I did not become the governor. For days, I allowed myself the comfort of grief and the energy of anger. Then I returned to the lessons I'd learned from my parents, from my college. The obligation to do what must be done, even when you are not where you want it to be. So, while I do not have the job of leading Georgia, I am still obliged to do the work that led me to run for office in the first place. The work of access to justice, to economic security, the work of a shared responsibility for progress. I do this work anyway because I learned long ago not to confuse power and position. As students, faculty, and staff, you have the power to shape how you will meet this moment and the privilege to take real action and create meaningful change. You don't need to be in a position of authority or even on the same campus to foment change. But you do need to make your voice heard. And that is exactly what we have witnessed in the wake of the murders of Black Americans like George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and Jacob Blake, and in the wake of economic disparities and social inequities. We look to the strength and tenacity of those willing to take to the streets and demand a society that values all human life, a resilience that does not allow those names to be a litany of loss, but instead a clarion call for change. Your generation has leveraged the right to protest, to bring attention to the wrenching pain of systemic injustice that has left far too many in a state of anguish and despair for generations. You've used your voices and technology to foster connection in a nation where COVID-19 has disproportionately harmed the most vulnerable. You've been innovative in an economic crisis that endangers the livelihoods of working families. You are driving yourselves to be better than this moment, greater than its challenges, and the architects of our needed solutions. When we combine the traits of perseverance and resilience, we create an alchemy that brings a new reality. In practice, that means that we must protest in the streets and that we must also protest at the ballot box. While voting can seem an inadequate solution, it is a necessary step towards progress. We must elect representatives who will cure our society of the ills that have been baked into our republic since its inception. Over time, we understand that voting in a democracy is not an event. It is a process that inexorably leads to progress, but only if we remain committed to the exercise. Knowing that when we lapse, when we take a break, when we turn away, those who oppose our progress rush to fill the silence in the space of our absence. But in 2020, when you show up to cast your vote, you won't be alone. Young Americans are the greatest untapped block of voters in this country. In my 2018 campaign for governor of Georgia, we increased youth participation by 139% because we knew we had to rely on young voters to guide our campaigns and listen rather than lecture. When young voters blend their voices at the polls with others of like minds, that's when democracy is at its finest. Regardless of age, voting is everything, from whether the pothole on our street gets fixed to whether our country goes to war and everything in between. America is a republic that relies on representative democracy to choose who guides our government. For the vast majority of us, then, voting is the one lever we have the ability to pull in setting the future of our nation. So we have to be honest about how much work voting requires. Across America, would-be voters continue to turn away or opt out, discouraged by the permanence of inequality and the persistence of voter suppression. Their fear is again and again made real by stories of neighbors denied provisional ballots in Georgia and lines that wind around city blocks in Milwaukee and Las Vegas because polling locations are shut down and alternatives never arrive. By undermining confidence in the political system, modern-day voter suppression has swapped rabid dogs and cops with billy clubs for restrictive voter ID laws and tangled rules for participation. And those who are the most vulnerable to suppression become the most susceptible to passing on that reluctance to others. Voting is not only our right, it is our proof that perseverance and resilience works, but only if we protect our rights by exercising them. If your vote didn't matter, there wouldn't be forces at work desperately trying to take it away. A spate of strict state voter ID laws enacted over the past decade has made it much harder for many young people to vote around this country. Address requirements tripped up students in some states, requiring them to have not only one legal address, rather than a dorm and their parents' home where their financial aid is granted. And polling places on campuses have been shuttered at alarming rates. But it has also been young people who have fought back, who have forced laws to change and rules to be unmade. We know that when young people are fired up, the world changes. But we need to ensure the electoral systems in place allow students in all states to be able to cast their ballots in a free, fair, and safe election. The terrible truth of our democracy is that a great number of young people who wanted to vote have been prevented from doing so because of legal or administrative barriers, but that cannot stop our voices from being heard, your voices from being heard. Because while suppression of the voices of young people who are entering our democratic process for the first time is especially insidious, I launched Fair Fight Action to combat voter suppression across the country in all its forms. While we certainly did not know that our democracy would face the challenge of a pandemic, we knew voters would face unprecedented challenges. And that's why we built a voter protection infrastructure so early. Fair Fight 2020 has voter protection teams across the country to make sure we're ready for November and for all of the elections to come. When we all have access to the ballot box, we are able to elect leaders who reflect our communities, share our values, and see our struggles. These leaders are the ones who know how critical it is that we work to eliminate disparities by investing in public education, in infrastructure, rural health care, broadband, increased economic opportunity, and more. We can address the problems right in front of us, from the COVID-19 pandemic and its subsequent economic impacts to the ensuring and enduring demand for justice and equality. We can tackle the fights we know are coming, from the looming student debt crisis to the perils of unmitigated climate change. While Carleton is leading the way on debt crisis, we know there are too many students like yourselves who worry about whether they can afford to stay in school. Voting will not immediately solve any or all of our problems, but the right to vote is our most fundamental tool when it comes to building a better country. Our votes determine who wields power to shape policy that impacts us and impacts generations to come. The right to vote isn't the only tool, though. We have others that are at our disposal when we're ready to answer the call and lift up the voices of our communities. To me, it is of critical importance that we are all counted in the 2020 census, which is why I also launched Fair Count to ensure an accurate count in this year's census. If you or your family has not filled out your 2020 census, please go to census.gov as soon as possible and fill it out. Those who have been hardest hit by COVID-19 are typically the hardest to count, and recent reports show an alarming undercount of students. That will affect Pell Grants and other financial aid. We need to redouble our investments to help folks amid this pandemic and ensure communities do not face an undercount. The message is simple. The census matters because it determines how your money is going to get spent and how your political power is divvied up. The census allocates $1.5 trillion every year based solely on the numbers collected this year. If people of color and young people do not get counted at the rates they should, we will lose $8 billion or more every year for the next 10 years. Again, those are dollars that don't go into Pell Grants or public hospitals or economic development to create the jobs you'll seek upon graduation. These are the dollars that make up your future. And the reality is the money does not disappear. It just goes to the people who are already overcounted. Those who are already doing well, they'll do better. And those who do poorly will do worse. The solution is to answer your census and make sure your friends and family do the same. Because if we don't get counted, we do not count. In 2020, we have the opportunity to transform this nation. We have the opportunity to elect leaders at every level of government who see us, who hear us, and who are willing to act on our demands. We have the opportunity to complete the 2020 census and ensure that we get the resources and the political representation that our communities deserve. But I know at this moment, voting and filling out the census can feel too small to bring about the changes we need. But I know that these actions bring us closer to the future we deserve. They did in '92, and they do in 2020. Our focus now is on how survival and recovery can be made real. But you are embarking on the journey that will change our society into a nation that is stronger, more vital, and more robust in its pursuit of good. But your willingness to face these challenges head on is proof already of your capacity to overcome, your adaptability to meet the moment, and proof that time will only strengthen your formidable resolve. Beyond the tumult of this year, I urge you to think about the world you intend to shape with your minds, your service, and your legacy. I am confident that better is coming because students like you are preparing to enter the arena. Whether the test is our 2020 politics, the impact of social justice, or how to approach this upcoming academic year, remember to hold on to your resilience and your perseverance. Your capacity to overcome the adversity of this moment and your force in shaping us to a reimagined future is real. You are knights, defending your right to be stronger and more capable than these crises believe you can be. Possessed of a resilience that sees our current urgency as a summons to persist. Each of you, together and as one, will chart a course that will change the future. So Carleton Knights, let's get it done.
Thank you, Ms. Abrams. We draw hope and inspiration from your words and ongoing work for justice and democracy in our country. And we are deeply grateful for the time you have shared with us today. Another Georgian, civil rights leader and Congressman John Lewis, who served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1987 until his death this past July, wrote, "But we must accept one central truth and responsibility as participants in democracy. Freedom is not a state, it is an act. It is not some enchanted garden perched high in a distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is the continuous action we all must take, and each generation must do its part to create an even more fair and more just society." This ends our opening convocation. Thank you each for watching, and blessings on your new academic year.